the channel to discuss all things aviation. Angelo Dube welcoming you back. Listen, since the last time we discussed the issue of the Antonov AN-225, which was bombed in Ukraine by Russian forces which had invaded the land of Ukraine, certain things have happened in the aviation sector, and these are worth discussing. This is a quick video to discuss those things. Number one, the one thing that has happened is, you remember there was a threat to recall all aircraft that has been leased to companies operating from the Russian Federation. And as soon as those European lessors made the requirement that the lessees must return the aircraft, that is the Boeing 737s, the Boeings and the Airbuses that had been leased to Russian companies, be brought back to Europe. As soon as that call was made, guess what the Russian government did? The Russian government simply made a new law. This was a law to nationalize all this equipment which had been leased from Europe. Can this be done in international law? Indeed, international law allows for that. A country can nationalize assets in its country, in its territory. But there are rules around nationalization of assets. What Putin has done is signed into law a directive that those aircrafts must remain within Russian soil and they must be surrendered to the state. So those aircrafts now belong to the state of Russia. Those aircrafts are now property of the state of Russia, which means the European lessors who had leased these aircrafts to the Russian companies can no longer get them back. But is that the end of the story? No. The European companies can sue Russia for compensation because international law is clear that if a state is to expropriate, if a state is to nationalize and take over assets belonging to a particular company and make them property of the state, then there must be adequate and prompt compensation. So there must be compensation paid out to those companies. So in other words, Russia is within its rights to do what it did, to actually declare that all these aircrafts now belong to the state of Russia. But they must go a step further and compensate those companies who are losing equipment, who are losing property through this expropriation. The second thing that's happened in aviation in the past few weeks was we saw reciprocity in the way that Russia dealt with certain countries and the way certain countries dealt with Russia. It all began with certain countries saying we're banning all Russian aircraft from our airspace. And Russia, in retaliation, banned aircraft from those states in their airspace. Now, is this allowed in international law? Is it allowed in law at all? Indeed, every state has sovereignty over its airspace. So a state has sovereignty over its land, over its waters, and over its airspace. It determines who can fly over its airspace and who cannot fly over its airspace. So when the United Kingdom, for instance, declared that all Russian aircraft cannot enter the airspace of the United Kingdom, it was acting within its rights under international law. And when Russia decided, since UK has done 1, 2, 3, we are going to turn the coin, to flip the coin and say we will not allow UK registered aircraft in our airspace. Russia was within its rights as well to do that because it is a sovereign state. That airspace in Russia belongs to the state of Russia and not to the state of the UK. So whatever has been happening now in the past few weeks in the space of airspace regulation or airspace or access to the airspace of these different countries, these countries have been acting within the ambit of international law. They've been pursuing their sovereignty rights within international law. They're allowed to do that, and it's perfectly legal to do so. So we saw the UK first banning the aircraft from Russia from flying in the UK airspace, and then we saw Russia retaliating by banning UK aircraft from Russian airspace. And then before long, so many states in Europe specifically were declaring that Russian aircraft are no longer allowed in their airspace. What that meant was that Russia itself would in turn ban aircraft from most of those European countries from traversing its airspace. And indeed, the repercussions there are borne by me and you, the passengers who fly these aircrafts, the business people who ferry our cargo using these particular aircrafts. Because now suddenly, a flight to Japan, which would have taken 11 hours, will now take 17 hours because they must now avoid Russian airspace in order to land in Japan. And that means more fuel spent on that leg of flying, and that means more crew time spent flying a single flight. You need to have more crew that will be on board to become relief crew for that particular flight. So the companies are going to spend on resourcing the aircraft in terms of the pilots flying the aircraft, in terms of fuel burnt while flying that aircraft. So that will trickle down to the consumer on the ground, because the consumer must then pay more for the same flight that would have taken 11 hours. It's going to take 17 hours now. It's going to be more expensive, and the cost will be borne by no other than me and you, the consumer, the flyer, the passenger who boards that aircraft to fly to Japan, because we must now avoid Russian airspace. So those are the few developments that happened in the past few weeks, and we are watching the situation as it unfolds in the Russian-Ukraine conflict. But I was just trying to answer those two questions. Can Russia necessarily nationalize these foreign leased aircrafts that are within its airspace or within its territory? And the answer was yes, indeed. Russia can do that. It's within its rights in international law to do that, but it must compensate those companies that are affected by its nationalization or its expropriation of that particular property. Secondly was, can Russia block aircraft from flying over its airspace? And the answer was indeed, in international law, Russia is a sovereign state. It owns the property, it owns the soil, it owns the waters, it owns the airspace above the soil and the waters of Russia. So it determines who can come in and who can not come into its airspace. So even when the UK was banning Russian aircraft from entering UK airspace, that too was equally allowed in international law, and there was nothing untoward about it. It's the way states play with each other. It's the way states relate to each other. It's called international relations. It's called international law. That's how they relate to each other. I hope that was an informative short video right there, and if it was, please do click the like button below and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We've seen so much growth, and thank you. You have made it grow. You've made this channel grow, and we appreciate that. And remember, our mantra here is, with every hour the cockpit beckons, and with every hour the cockpit beckons basically means that whatever you do, every hour you expand on anything, make sure that hour is geared towards obtaining the result that you want. It's geared towards you achieving the goal that you are looking for, the goal that you've aspired for all these years. So whatever hour you spend, expend it on something worthwhile, because with every hour the cockpit beckons. Until next time, enjoy people, signing out and saying